What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Tomatolito Show, and we have ourselves a fight. As a matter of fact, two big fights tomorrow night. On Showtime, we're going to have Stephen Fulton against Brandon Figueroa in a unification bout, bringing the WBO, WBC titles. Those two will be on the line, and they're trying to unify the 122-pound division. The other champ in that division that holds the IBF and WBA titles is MJ Murajan, who just recently defended his titles. He retained his titles by beating Jose Velasquez in a fight that ended up being a tougher fight for him than expected. Jose Velasquez gave him everything he could handle, but in the end, MJ ended up getting the decision win, retains those two titles, and is standing by, watching what happens tonight between Stephen Fulton and Brandon Figueroa. That's going to be a really interesting fight. That's over on Showtime. The one that I really want to cover today, and I'll go ahead and dedicate a special episode just for Stephen Fulton and Brandon Figueroa. But let's talk about the main one, the one that has everybody's attention tonight. Although that one is a huge fight with big title implications for that division. The one fight that has been on and off throughout the year, has gotten so much media coverage, so much attention, because there's been so many issues that have happened with the promotional companies, with Triller, who was the original holder of this event or host of this event. The IBF got involved. So the Teofimo Lopez and George Kambosos fight is finally going to happen. Both fighters made weight, and I'll give you the news. Fulton and Figueroa also made weight, so that fight is on as well. No issues there. But this card is pretty good. The undercard for Teofimo Lopez and George Kambosos is one that's catching my eye. Overall, it's going to be somewhat of a soft card, except for that main co-main event, which is going to be between Asinga Fuzile and Kenichi Ogawa. Kenichi Ogawa, 25-1-1, and going against Asinga Fuzile, who I'm a big fan of. I like his style. I like the threat that he poses to each fighter that he steps into the ring with. Kind of like a mini Ike Cortez is what he reminds me of. Asinga Fuzile, 15-1. This fight, the reason that I'm interested in this fight is because it's going to be, they're fighting for the vacant IBF title in the 130-pound division. The other two champs, Oscar Valdez with the WBC title, whom we just saw this year dethrone the Alacrán Miguel Berchelt, and then later defend his title against Robson Conceição in what was somewhat of a controversial decision win for Oscar Valdez. It was a tougher fight for him than he expected, and I even called it. I'm a big fan of Oscar Valdez, but I honestly thought that Conceição did enough to have won that fight, yet they gave a decision win to Oscar Valdez, and one of the judges even had a landslide victory for him, which was somewhat crazy for me to even fathom. Nonetheless, he's still the standing champion representing the WBC in the 130. Shakur Stevenson is the newly crowned champion for the WBO. He just dethroned Jamel Herring, who's one of my favorite fighters as well. Jamel Herring was the longest, not just the oldest champion in that division, but the longest reigning champion in that division, because the other titles changed hands so much, and this IBF one has been vacant for quite a while now. So Asinga Fuzile against Kenichi Ogawa, awesome main event. I've been waiting for that fight to take place, and for this title to be up there already, for someone to hold this title so we could start having unification style fights. This is the era that we're in right now. It's all about the unifications and people shooting for the undisputed throne in their respective divisions. So that, keep an eye out for that one. Other than that, everything else seems like it's going to be somewhat of a soft card, or more of a lesser known opposition, lesser known fighters on the rest of the card. Teofimo Lopez stepping in, 16-0, 12 knockouts, and a lot of experience, a nice resume that accompanies him into this ring tonight, into this fight tonight. George Kambosos, 19-0 with 10 knockouts. The resume, not so solid with the exception of his last two fights. How do I see this fight playing out? All depends on what version of fighters we see tonight. They both have similar layoffs. Kambosos was last active October 31st, if I remember, or just at the close of October last year, and it was against the best opposition he's faced to date, and that was against Lee Selby. He ended up getting the decision nod on that fight, and good for him, because that was the biggest step up in competition to date for George Kambosos in his 19 wins. Similar layoffs. 2 weeks prior to that, Teofimo Lopez dethroned Fuzile Lomachenko and became the undisputed champion at 135. Since then, Teofimo Lopez has been considered as the undisputed champion at 135. And because of that, the reason I bring that up is because 3 titles will be on the line tonight. Not the WBC franchise designated title that he ended up taking from, I guess, wrongfully taking from Lomachenko. After I've been researching as to what's going on with this franchise title and all this, I'll touch on that here in a second, and I think it'll be pretty cool for us to review that. 3 titles will be on the line. George Kambosos is the only reason he's fighting Teofimo is because he became the IBF title mandatory. He doesn't hold any titles. He's not bringing anything else to the table other than his chance at challenging for a title. It just so happens to be against Teofimo Lopez, who ended up dethroning Lomachenko. And now Kambosos is going to have the chance to go for the other 2 titles, the WBA and the WBO, along with that IBF that he was originally lined up to challenge for and compete for. The upside is for George Kambosos. Now, as for Teofimo Lopez, why is the WBC title not on there? Even though he's carrying the ring title, he does have the Ring Magazine title because he took it from the man who was Fuzile Lomachenko. But that's the Ring Magazine plus the other 3. He's the man in that division right now. Teofimo Lopez is. But the WBC title is not in play. As I've been researching about this, the way that I understood the franchise designation that the WBC initially created was basically a free ticket or a free pass for these fighters. It was originally created for Canelo Alvarez in the middleweight division, and later designated towards to Fuzile Lomachenko. And the way that I understood it was basically a free ticket or a free pass for a big mega fight that would bypass whoever the standing mandatory was for the WBC. They would put them aside and honor the franchise champion's option of fighting somebody else of a bigger name or a bigger payday. At that time, it was thought that Canelo was going to be fighting or completing the trilogy with Triple G. So whoever the mandatory happened to be for the WBC, they were going to have to wait if that third fight between Canelo and Triple G was in play or in negotiations. They would basically honor the franchise champion's decision of wanting to chase after that big fight instead of their mandatory. They ended up designating the same thing to Lomachenko, and hence Sulaiman created this issue, the WBC created this issue, and it only got deeper because after Teofimo Lopez won, people started saying, well, wait a minute, is he not? Is he the undisputed or is he not at 135? He continues to represent himself as the undisputed. He even showed up to the Canelo post-fight press conference recently with all the titles and took a picture with Canelo with all the titles because Canelo just completed that feat at 168 when he defeated Plant. Teofimo Lopez continues to be known as the undisputed champion. This is why I ended up finding the WBC designation and how they consider this, how they try to clarify this mess. Now, Sulaiman gave an interview at one point where he ends up saying, Both of them are my champions as related to Devin Haney and Teofimo Lopez. He says we recognize both of them as champions. But then later he backtracked, and this is going to show you why. I'm going to read you this. There's 7 points that clarifies what the WBC franchise champion and its stipulations or its guidelines. I'll read you the 7 points and see if this makes sense to you. Point 1. Number 1, the franchise champion designation is exclusively by appointment of the WBC Board of Governors by a majority vote of the board. The designation number 2, this designation is not transferable and is exclusive to the fighter who receives such designation. That's the key right there. Point number 2 is what would trump Teofimo Lopez from not being the undisputed champion. Again, number 1, the franchise champion designation is exclusively by appointment of the WBC Board of Governors by a majority vote of the board. Number 2, this designation is not transferable and is exclusive to the fighter who receives such designation. Therefore, you're unable to pass that honor to whoever defeats you. Number 3, the franchise champion will be designated as WBC Emeritus Champion once he retires from boxing. So Canelo and Lomachenko. The WBC has not come out designating Teofimo Lopez as the franchise champion. Number 4, the franchise champion will proudly represent the WBC in every single fight as a reigning WBC champion. This is regardless of any specific conditions or titles being associated with all future fights. WBC rules and regulations will govern under the traditional conditions of boxing and the franchise champion fights. WBC will approve through the franchise champion's promoter every opponent scheduled to fight. Number 5, the franchise champion agrees to participate in a minimum of 2 social responsibility events every year organized and in conjunction with the WBC. Number 6, the WBC may recognize a WBC champion in the division or divisions where the franchise champion currently competes. I'll read that again. The WBC may recognize a WBC champion in the division or divisions where the franchise champion currently competes. Meaning, at that time, if Lomachenko would have moved up to super lightweight to 140 pounds and beat the current title holder at 140, the WBC championship would become vacant for the next contender to become WBC champion. He basically gets to go to the big money fight and relinquishes whatever the hell's happening with the WBC champion at that point. The WBC title becomes vacant and available for the next contenders in line. Number 7, the WBC may award a diamond championship belt in those fights in which the franchise champion engages. If the franchise champion loses, the winner will receive the diamond belt and may be considered as a mandatory contender of the division. Those 2 points are the key. Out of all 7 points, number 2, the designation is not transferable and is exclusive to the fighter who receives such designation. Only 2 fighters have received that designation, from my knowledge, Canelo and Lomachenko. Teofimo did not receive that. So number 7, if the franchise champion loses, which Lomachenko did, the winner will receive the diamond belt, meaning Teofimo should be walking around with a diamond belt. WBC Diamond Belt and may be considered as mandatory contender of the division. Yet we had the Javier Fortuna Jojo Diaz for the number one contender spot, which was supposed to be Ryan Garcia and Fortuna. Then Ryan Garcia fell out. Then it was Ryan Garcia and Jojo Diaz going for another number one contender. Ryan Garcia fell out again with another injury. Jojo Diaz beat Fortuna. Now Jojo Diaz is going to challenge and exercise that number one spot that he earned against Devin Haney in a week's time. That should have been Teofimo Lopez and Devin Haney fighting for the WBC title. He beat the franchise champion. Teofimo Lopez technically holds a free pass to a shot at the WBC champion, which is Devin Haney. Teofimo's walking around with the diamond belt, which is the pass. It's the golden ticket to that WBC title shot. And that's why Teofimo Lopez is not the undisputed champion at 135. Based on this, now Suleiman goes on interviews and says, well, we recognize both of them. Both of them are our champions. Well, you continue to muddy the waters and you continue to create more smoke for people to not understand what the hell's going on. And he doesn't even read what the hell the board of governors of the WBC wrote, because it's real clear on here, and he should have put an end to this argument last year. Immediately after Teofimo won, he's going to get the diamond belt. He's not the undisputed champion. What he just created is an opportunity for someone else to move in, enter Devin Haney, who got not reinstated, but who got placed as or named the WBC champion. And that's why people continue to accuse Devin Haney. He's an email champion. He's a paper champion. He's this. Well, the WBC designated him as the champion of the organization. With Lomachenko's franchise title not being transferable, that would have given Teofimo the diamond belt, which is a free pass directly to the front of the line and challenge Devin Haney, who the WBC is recognizing as their champion. Why does Mauricio Suleiman come out and say both of them are champions? And that was on a DAZN show. I think it was Akim Barak or one of those shows. So you continue to muddy the waters. You continue. He's done it on multiple interviews in Spanish networks as well. Over the last year, he continues to muddy the waters because he's not even reading his own stipulations for how to designate and how to recognize a franchise champion. So those 2 points are it. And that's why Teofimo Lopez is the disputed, undisputed champion. And just based on these points, he's not the undisputed champion. I saw him beat Lomachenko. I covered the show. I even had a whole episode named The Takeover is Real, because I saw what happened. I saw Teofimo perform. I saw him win, regardless of the excuses. Everything else is hearsay of Lomachenko. That was a half-ass Lomachenko performance. He was hindered by this, or he was affected by that, or he just started slow, or the layoff. Who cares? They stepped into the ring. They signed the contract. They knew they were going to fight. They trained, and the fight was on. And Teofimo Lopez outpointed him, as decided by the judges that night. You guys know time and again that I'm a big critic of the judges when they're asleep during these fights and end up issuing a 118, 110 or a 120 to 109 or whatever the hell it is, where it's a landslide victory and you're like, what the hell were you watching? But that night, it was close decision. It was decent scoring by the judges, and it was evident that Teofimo Lopez was on his A game that night, and we didn't get to see the best Lomachenko that night. The rematch is what we want to see. But these points right now that I'm reading to you is why Teofimo Lopez is not walking in with the WBC title, and it's not on the line. This should clarify everything, and that's why there's 3 titles on the line tonight. Yet, he's not taking advantage of it. He hasn't read these points. Send them to Teofimo Lopez. I wish I could, but I'm sure he's not. I mean, hopefully somebody's listening that has contact with that camp so they could actually clarify this and then stop walking around as the undisputed champion. as much as I like Teofimo Lopez and I'm pulling for him tomorrow night, stop walking around with the undisputed, claiming to be the undisputed champ. Yes, you completed a feat and you got yourself a first round ticket, a first flight ticket to Devin Haney, and to skip the line and get a title shot, regardless of who the number one contender or number two contenders are in line. They have to wait because you beat the man who held that pass. And at that time, there was no other champion. Lomachenko was it. So that should clarify everything. Now, we get back to the fight at hand. George Kambosos' resume is a little bit suspect to me. It's not suspect, I guess that's the wrong word, but it's definitely not to the pedigree of the level of opposition that Teofimo Lopez has faced. He's had a lot of local fights, most of his fights in Europe, lower level opposition. He's coming into this fight very talented and very confident, maybe a little bit overconfident, to the point where he's even discrediting Vasily Lomachenko's accomplishments. He's making the claim that Teofimo Lopez is just living off of that victory over Vasily Lomachenko, and he's even mentioned in several interviews, he's like, who the hell's Vasily Lomachenko and what has he done? It's crazy to think that you have the level of opposition that you faced. Yes, he's confident in his abilities, but when you look at his resume and you put any one of his fights, he's impressive at first glance because he's fast. He's got fast hands, fast delivery, and he's pretty accurate with his punches. He's not too selective with his punch placement. He's not too picky when it comes to picking his punches. He just lets them go like a machine gun. He punches forward, punches fast, and he's fairly accurate. But he doesn't have that pop behind his punches. Go back and watch his fights. He's got 10 knockouts, but as the level of opposition has gotten better, the knockouts have come less and less. Now, the level of opposition, 3 fights ago, he had a knockout win, but the last 2 fights are the absolute best fighters that he's faced in his entire resume, in his entire body of work, and that was in Mickey Bey, who was a crazy back and forth fight, and he got the decision win over it. Mickey Bey was a split decision at that. Both of these last 2 fights were split decisions, which means there was some doubt whether they weren't majority decisions. They were split decisions because there was doubt and there was enough weight there for the other fighter to possibly make a claim at winning that fight or having pulled out the victory. Kambosos outpointed Mickey Bey, came away with the decision win, and I think rightfully so. I remember that fight. It was on ESPN, and I think rightfully so. I think Kambosos did beat Mickey Bey. The Lee Selby fight was a little bit closer for me. That's another split decision win. Very fast, very engaging. He's a pressure fighter. He likes to come forward and throw those punches in bunches. He's very good at delivering those punches and landing them, but he does get hit a lot. He gets hit a lot, and he usually gets hit a lot on the reset. And that's where I see him a little bit faulty, or where I see the flaw in which I think Teofimo Lopez is going to exploit it. I see Teofimo Lopez winning this. I don't agree with Teofimo Lopez where he says that this is going to be a first round knockout victory over Kambosos. I think Kambosos, I give him a little more credit than that. But I do see Teofimo Lopez winning this. Kambosos may end up very well having a hell of a chin. He proved it against Lee Selby. He proved it against Mickey Bey, and he's proved it in the past with several Filipino fighters that he ended up fighting earlier in his career, who tend to pop pretty hard, and his chin has held to date. So he may very well, and he's had a similar length of layoff. So who knows? His power may have improved during these last few camps. He was ready to go in June. He was ready to go in August. He's been in camp. So I wouldn't put it past him that he's improved a lot, that his his chin has gotten better, that his pop has gotten better, so he may show up let's hope that he shows up a better version of himself from what we saw last October. But I just don't see how he's going to be able to pull out. I don't see the hand speed being the difference maker here, because you got Teofimo Lopez with also a high level of speed behind those hands. He delivers quickly. The angles that he utilizes is where I see the difference maker here in Teofimo Lopez. The angles and the footwork is the key for me. I see Teofimo Lopez just smothering Kambosos by way of angles and not being there when Kambosos decides to counter or throw back. When he decides to initiate his attack, I don't see Teofimo Lopez getting touched up much. If he's vintage Teofimo, he'll be in and out, and he'll be moving out of the way, or he'll be moving to the side while still there and landing uppercuts on Lopez. I think that smothering effect, if we have vintage Teofimo, he'll stop Kambosos. Maybe somewhere around the middle rounds of the fight. If we don't get vintage Teofimo, which is starting to look that way after the weigh-ins, one thing is the weigh-ins. That caught my eye. He looked weight drained, really weight drained. And it almost, the first image that popped in my head when I saw Teofimo, yes, he made weight. And he was very eloquent during the interviews that they were conducting there after the weigh-in. Very eloquent, very well spoken. It's not like he was irritated or frustrated or short with anybody. He was very eloquent, very well spoken. So you knew that he was in his full senses, but visually he looked very weight drained, similar to what I was saying was the image that popped in my head was that of Conor McGregor of years back when he was trying to, when he was making 145, I believe was the division that he was fighting in. And you saw the skeletal, facial structure, that McGregor would show up to, at those weigh-in events, the ceremonial weigh-ins. So that's what it reminded me of when I saw him yesterday. Nonetheless, he was very composed. He carried himself really well. He was not short with anybody. He was very lengthy, actually, in his explanations and his answers and his interviews. So I think he's going to be good. He's going to hydrate well. He's going to be good. Something else that was brought up, he disclosed that he has a lingering shoulder, and he's coming in with a slight handicap of a shoulder injury. If I remember correctly, I believe it was the left shoulder that he suffered an injury for, and he hasn't fully recovered. It's not fully healed, and he's stepping into the ring with that. He's not making excuses, and he even mentioned that he's not using it as an excuse. He's just saying, I don't care. I want to get this over with. I'm going to show up and I'm going to stop this guy regardless of what's going on. Number 3, June 19th was delayed because he contracted COVID. So a lot of fighters have disclosed both in MMA and in boxing. One of the famous cases that we saw was in the UFC, Kazmat Chimaev, who ended up contracting COVID, and he was struggling. He was really hurt, lingering effects. Of course, we just saw him come back in action and dismantle his opponent in traditional fashion, that like he's been doing with his opposition throughout his career. But for a long period of time, he had lingering issues where his health was really, really in a really bad state. And Dana White even came out and said so in several interviews during the time that he was suffering from that. So they ended up transferring him to the U.S., I believe, and they took him to the UNC out in Las Vegas, and they provided better care for him than what he was getting out in Dagestan, I believe. So Dana White took care of him, and he ended up he's back to his full capacity. Teofimo Lopez, who knows if he's suffering anything from lingering effects of COVID, but more so than anything, those are the two things that I saw. The layoff, both of them have similar layoffs. But the COVID thing, who knows how his body, he seems fine. He says he's fine. He's back active. He's looking really good during his workouts. The weight drain is the issue that I saw, and the shoulder. We'll see if that comes into play. I believe it was the left shoulder. So we'll see how if that comes into play early in the fight, if he ends up aggravating that injury, and therefore it hinders his strategy or his game plan, and he has to adjust. nonetheless, this is what champions do, and they adjust, they adapt, and they overcome. So we'll see. This is the first big showing for Teofimo since he defeated Lomachenko, and we'll see what version of Teofimo Lopez shows up. I think he'll stop him if we get anywhere shy of or anywhere close to a vintage Teofimo Lopez performance. I think the angles will be too much. The footwork, the angles, and the speed in which he delivers his punches is going to be too much for Kambosos, who is more of a pressure fighter and delivering punches and bunches. We'll see. That's how I see the fight playing out right now. I think Teofimo stops him somewhere around the middle rounds, the midway point of the fight. Really, really good fight. Don't miss the co-main event, which is a Singa Fuzile and Kenichi Ogawa. We're finally going to get a champion in the 130-pound division for the IBF. And all champions will be accounted for. All titles will be accounted for finally. Then we could start getting some bigger fights in that division. That's an exciting division with Shakur, Valdez. Who's the other champion? Shakur, Valdez. We'll have one here with the IBF. Oh, and Roger Gutierrez is the WBA champion now, the regular champion. He's the world champion for the WBA. The super champion title was relinquished. It was vacated by Gervonta Davis, who is now going to solely focus on 135 and 140. And his next fight against Pitbull Cruz is going to be at 140. So I'll leave you guys with that. June 5th to June 19th to August 14th to multiple dates in September. And it was going to be a Tuesday showing at the Hulu Theater, later back to a Monday. And all those fall throughs, the IBF getting involved, Triller ended up exiting and faulting on their contract and on their word. With all that going on, Top Rank tried to save this. Eddie Hearn ended up being the savior along with Matchroom and DAZN. And this is going to be, you'll be able to catch this on DAZN. So thanks to Eddie Hearn for keeping this fight intact. Remember how much happened to this fight just for it to come to fruition, where it looked like it wasn't going to happen at all. And they started revisiting the idea of Teofimo rematching Lomachenko in December after Lomachenko's victory over Nakatani. That was the talks already. Those talks were starting to get underway that it was going to be Lopez and Lomachenko in a rematch fight in December. So, and then this got back on track thanks to Eddie Hearn and Matchroom and DAZN. So let's get this over with. So much crap. You see them at the weigh-in. The disdain, the dislike, the hatred for one another seems to be real, almost uncomfortable. But I can't wait. I'm excited. So check that out. Tomorrow night, fight is on. Finally, looks like it's happening, and enjoy it. I'll talk to you guys all soon, and keep an eye out. I'm gonna do a preview episode of the other big fight happening tomorrow night, which is between Fulton and Brendan Figueroa. So take care of yourselves. Have a good day.